much, Sarah and Jeff. Okay, so I'm gonna start the recording.
Hi, my name is Mariah Dean. I'm with the University of Maryland Extension. I'm the St. Mary's County Master Gardener Coordinator. Today, Patricia Armstrong is going to talk to us about perennial gardening. Thank you so much, Patricia.
Hi, it's glad to see everyone. I'm glad you've joined us for a talk about perennial gardening. So we're going to go through about a 20-minute presentation here, and we have a little short video hands-on demonstration that I did earlier today to show you as well. So let's talk about how to plant and install perennials with a focus on spring blooming bulbs. This presentation was put together by several master gardeners, including myself, over the years, and the information comes from the University of Maryland Extension, mostly the Master Gardener Handbook, and you can see a link there. The Home and Garden Information Center is a great website for you to use anytime you have a question about gardening. There are a lot of publications that answer a lot of questions, and anytime you want to find that website, just Google HGIC Maryland, Home and Garden Information Center Maryland. Just HGIC Maryland, it'll bring up this link, hgic.umd.edu. Or you can email Mariah Dean, who just introduced me. She's the St. Mary's County Master Garden Coordinator. So what about perennials? Well, there are so many choices, so many colors, and they grow spring, summer, fall, the growing season. So these are the things that make us smile with a lot of colors during the summer. We call them herbaceous perennials because they live year after year. This means that the tops of the plants die back to the ground each fall after we have freezes, and then every spring new plants arise from the soil, from the roots. So they survive the winter, hopefully. And we live in zone 7B, which is a hardiness zone map of the United States. If you look, we're in 7B. 7A is just a little bit north of us, or about maybe 5 to 10 degrees colder on average. So we're in 7B. So if you go to a garden center or a nursery, they're buying plants that are good for our zone. If you order perennials from a catalog, you need to make sure that you're ordering for zone 7 or 7B, so that hopefully you'll have them survive our winter. So popular perennials that you may know about or heard about are things like daylily, iris, hosta, black-eyed Susan, sedum, ginger, astil, virginia, chrysanthemum, lily of the valley, larabi, poppy, water lily, ornamental grass, and many, many others. And depending on their growth rates, usually we divide perennials every 2 to 8 years, depending on how they look, and if they're starting to not bloom well, or they're getting just really big, it kind of gives you an indication that it's time to dig them up and divide them. And dividing them helps promote new growth and better blooming. So to select your perennials, think about the 2 most important things: sunlight and drainage. So you have to think about, does that plant like full sunlight, or does it like full shade or partial shade? If you buy a shady plant that looks pretty at the nursery and plant it in full direct sunlight, it's not going to do well for you. So it's very important to consider what the plant needs. And all plants like good drainage. They don't like to sit in water. It starves them of oxygen. The roots cannot take it, so that is very important. So decide if you want your bed to look formal or informal. Observe plants in your neighborhood, things that you see blooming at different times of the year, and find out what they are and what times of the year they bloom. And you might choose plants that flower together at the same time and look very showy, or stagger bloom times so that you have something happening all during the growing season. You might think about the design with regard to form, height, and texture for varied interest. the color of the blossoms in relation to your surrounding things, either plants or fences or other structures in your yard. You might think about, how do you want it to look? How do you want the mood to feel when you look at that garden? If you plant red, yellow, and orange and bright, cheery flowers, it makes a real cheerful look. If you want to make a calm, relaxing scene, you might choose blue and white flowering plants. For a romantic, old-fashioned look, you might choose pastel colors. You can have gardens of varying heights, like the garden in the picture on the right is a very informal type garden. It has a blend of some ornamental trees and some grasses and different leaf textures that make the garden very interesting. You can look at the color wheel and decide if you want the colors to be analogous, like colors that are next to each other on a color wheel, such as different shades of blue and violet. Or you could go complementary and look at colors on the opposite sides of the color wheel, such as blue with orange. So you can decide, how do you want the garden to look? Okay, installation and maintenance. You can test your garden soil if you haven't tested it. If you're starting a brand new bed, you might want to test your soil just to see what kind of nutrients or acidity or whatever the type of soil is, to see what it might need for the plants that you want to plant. You can incorporate organic matter such as mulch or compost into your soil to help enrich it and aerate it. Dig a hole large enough to accept the root system. You can water it in, but you don't have to soak it, just water it in. And then once perennials are planted, there's not a whole lot of maintenance. The four things you have to think about: watering if we don't get enough rainfall, of course weeding, fertilization, and removing the spent blossoms that die out. If you remove them or prune them out, it helps keep the plant producing more flowers. And insect control, insects are something that I will comment on real quick, because insecticides are something that try to use them very minimally, because we want to keep our beneficial insects. So if you're trying to get rid of Japanese beetles, as an example, you can put 7 dust out and get rid of the beetles, but you may be damaging some other beneficial bugs. So if you can tolerate the Japanese beetles, as an example, if I have a problem, I just go out, put on disposable gloves and a bag, and I know it's a little gross, but squish them off the plant and put them in the bag and throw that in the garbage. And in about 2 or 3 weeks, if you have other flowering plants in your yard, it brings in the beneficial insects that are good for pollination and just good for your yard, and they're predators on the bad insects. So if you can tolerate a short, like a 2 to 3 week period sometimes of the bad insects, usually they go away and you really don't have to damage your beneficial bugs. Okay, watering, if no rainfall, of course you want to go out. The best time of day to water is in the early part of the day, but if you can't do it then, just do it when you can. And to really deeply water, you should check the soil to see if the water has gone down 6 inches, but I never do that. But I'm not going to do that. But, just use your common sense and go out and water infrequently and as deeply as you can. And mulching, 1 or 2 inches of mulch will help conserve soil moisture as well as reduce weed growth. And one thing about mulching is you don't want 4 or 5 inches of mulch. The reason is that's going to encourage voles to nest in the mulch, and they may nibble on the roots of your plants. So it's better to keep it 1 or 2 inches of mulch to help conserve moisture and help block weed growth. And talking about weed growth, the best method is just 1 or 2 inches of organic mulch. In this photo, this lady has put down 2 or 3 sheets of newspaper on the ground, and she's layering 1 or 2 inches of mulch on top. That's another excellent way to block the light because the dormant weed seeds that are in your soil, as they see sunlight, that helps germinate those seeds. So if you can block the light, and that newspaper helps do that, and that newspaper, as it gets moist, it'll deteriorate and break down into the soil, so it'll kind of go away. But it's a temporary thing, and it does help. There are other things you can do. Of course, periodic hand pulling of weeds. Like I can't walk outside without pulling a weed. I mean, I'm always pulling. My yard's not weed free, but I mean, I do help control it by hand pulling. Another thing you can do is there are pre-emergent herbicides you can buy that can be sprinkled on top of the ground. One is called Preen, P-R-E-E-N. If you buy things like that, just follow label directions. And if you do put Preen down, it does help. I have good success with it helping me with weed control. But just remember, you can't put Preen down in an area that you've planted flower seeds, because then that'll prevent the flower seeds from germinating. So you have to be careful. It should be put down in a well-established bed where you're not putting fresh, new starts of seeds. Or if you're wanting the seeds to come back from the previous year, you might not put your Preen right in that area. So fertilization, again, you can start with a soil test, but a lot of perennials grow in just average, well-drained soil without a lot of fertilizer. You can just add a little compost to help the soil a little bit. That'll give it some nutrient. Some perennial native flowers do better without any fertilizer added. They like low fertility. However, there are some perennials that do like nitrogen and some nutrients, and they'll grow faster and bloom better with some fertilizer. And you can buy it in granular form or powdered form. The granular form is a slow release, such as Osmocote is one brand that you can sprinkle on top of the soil, and as the rain and as you water, it'll slowly release for about 2 to 3 months. But you can also buy powdered forms and put it in your watering can, or you can buy these powdered forms that are in like a little thing that hook to your hose, and you can like periodically apply fertilizer in that manner. But just remember, try to minimize the use of fertilizer, because we're trying to reduce the amount of fertilizer runoff into the Chesapeake Bay region. So it's better to follow label directions and only use it as you need to for the plants that really like it. Let's talk about dividing perennials. In general, it's best to divide spring and summer flowering perennials in the fall. And fall division should take place between early September and mid to late October. And of course, fall bloomers, you would divide them in the spring. As soon as you see the little green plant starting to emerge from the ground, that's a good time to dig up a fall perennial and divide it. So now there was a little video I did earlier today, and I think Mariah's going to kick that off. It's about maybe 3 or 4 minute video. Then I'll come back. Okay, Mariah.
Thank you, Patricia. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure my computer sound is on. Hide this and hit play. This is an amazing video. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
Hit play.
Hello, I'm Patricia Armstrong with the St. Mary's County Master Gardener Program, and I'm going to demonstrate how to divide perennial plants. In my yard this morning, I'm in Leonardtown, Maryland, at my home on my deck, and I went out in the yard and dug up a couple of things to show you. I have some iris rhizomes, which you can see the roots in the rhizome, and I have some daylilies. I'm going to tell you about dividing those. Whenever you go in your yard and you dig them up, just bring them up, and you can just break them in two by hand. Like this is another plant. This is a separate plant. So when you go back in your yard, I have a pot of soil, some potting soil here. You can relocate your plant, and if your soil is real hard and compacted, you can add a little compost to loosen up and aerate the soil a little bit if you like. But a lot of these perennials do well in the poor soil that we have in Maryland anyway, so don't worry too much. But you want to dig a hole to accept this root system, plant it down the hole, and cover it. And you only want to cover this rhizome to about surface level. You don't have to bury this deep. So just about to the surface of the top of this rhizome structure. So anyway, that is that. And I have another one here, as you can see, that I dug up. And you can see I can probably divide it in half. But you can break these apart by hand. You have new plants. The thing about perennials, every 3 to 4 years you can divide them, and you can either put them in other areas of your flower beds and make your beds bigger, or you can give them away to friends. You know, perennials are like the gift that keeps on giving. So you can do this, and I'll share it with friends. I have a daylily here, a couple pieces. I wanted to show you that when you dig up the root ball, you notice that in 3 or 4 years, you'll notice some of your plants just aren't producing as many flowers and are not as robust. And you can dig up the root ball. And what I do is I lay it on the side like this. And a good tool to have is a shovel, something like this. And I dig it up and I put it on the ground. You know, wear hard shoes, don't wear flip-flops. But I'll put it on the ground and just put your foot on this and just chomp it right in half. So this plant, you don't have to be real careful about chopping it in half. So this plant would probably chop in half again, and maybe in thirds, 2 or 3 plants. So here's one that I already cut in half. It was together like this, and I cut it in half. So now I can go in my yard, find a new place. But again, dig deep enough to accept the entire root ball. You know, tamp it down, give it a little water. You might want to sprinkle some slow release fertilizer on top according to label directions. Just sprinkle a little fertilizer, and it might look a little wilted or something for a day or two, but it'll establish in the root. And in the winter after frost, it'll die back to nothing, so this whole piece will be gone. You won't see anything. But in springtime, what I love about perennials is they come back. So that's the joy of springtime. So I hope this has helped you understand about division of perennials, and I hope you look forward to some of our future topics with the St. Mary's County University of Maryland Extension Program. So until then, happy gardening. Okay, well, hope you enjoyed that short video. Now let's talk about spring and summer bulbs. So why do we want to talk about bulbs? Well, they're fun, they're easy, they're reliable. They give you great spring color, and there's a huge variety. So what is a bulb? It's a flattened underground stem with a fleshy scale-like food storing leaf base surrounding a center bud. So the stem and leaves are not usually recognizable as such or often thought of like that, but that is their function. And corms and tubers and rhizomes are also other underground structures like bulbs. Major bulbs that you know are familiar with are like daffodils, tulips, hyacinths, and then minor bulbs are like crocus, snowdrops, great hyacinths. Location, like we've been saying, always pick an area with good drainage, and most likely these bulbs will probably like sunlight, most of them. So tulips and narcissi prefer part day, full sunlight, or filtered sunlight for optimum color and prolonged flowering periods. Soil preparation, you can get that soil test done if you like, and most bulbs prefer neutral soil. The soil test should be around a 7. And bulbs, again, they don't like poor drainage, they don't like wet feet. For clay soil, you can try adding sand or peat moss. for sandy soil, you can add the moss or aged compost. And never add things like horse manure, mushroom compost, or other hot manure to your flower beds, because that will burn the roots or the bulbs. When you purchase your bulbs, look for high quality bulbs, because it's very important that you pick bulbs that are plump and firm, and make sure the base of it is firm and intact, because that flower has already developed before the bulb is even offered for sale. I mean, the energy within that bulb is there before you purchase it. So you want it to be firm. And if you like big flowers, look for big bulbs. I mean, the bigger the bulb is an indication that it's going to make a bigger flower. Bulbs are bought locally at the garden centers or through mail order catalogs. And try to buy a mix of early, mid, and late blooming bulbs so that you have some succession of blooming that you can enjoy. The most reliable tulips are Darwin hybrids and that type of species, and those tend to live much longer and truly perennialize. Crocus thomasianus is a tough, durable crocus that is one of the best species to use in lawns or compacted areas such as urbanized soils or under trees. When you plant your bulbs, wait till the weather has turned cooler and before the ground is frozen. You want to place the bulbs in the hole with the pointed end of the bulb up. And read the label instructions for how deep. It could say plant it 2, 3, 4, 5 inches deep, 6 inches deep. So read the label. And you can use a trowel, a shovel, or a long handled bulb planter. Or you can buy an auger fitting that fits on the end of your cordless drill. So if you have a lot of bulbs, you might like the use of a cordless drill. Fertilizer, use a slow release fertilizer or bone meal or fish meal. Avoid using high nitrogen fertilizer on bulbs. And don't place the fertilizer in the bottom of the planting hole, and don't mix it in the soil at the bottom of the planting hole. This could cause the root to burn. So you want to broadcast the fertilizer as a top dressing only on top of the soil after you've planted the bulbs and the soil is tamped down. And always look at the rate of application on the label for the fertilizer. If it doesn't rain within a week or so, gently water the planting site. And you can apply fertilizer about 3 times a year on bulbs at planting time, in early spring when you first see the green poke through the soil, and then finally in late spring or early summer just before the flower and the plant starts to die back. Maintenance for bulbs. Some bulbs need to be staked. There's little things you can buy that help the stem stay up during storms or wind. And when the flowers fade, it's good to deadhead out the flower stalk stem because that prevents seed formation. This takes away energy from, once the flower happens, you want the energy to go back to the bulb. So once the flower happens, you want to get rid of it when it fades, so the bulb will continue to have the energy go back into the bulb. Fall is the best time to divide and relocate bulbs. Dig the entire clump, carefully separate, and replant elsewhere. And remember to use a marker so that you remember where you planted the bulb, so you don't, go there in the spring and start digging to put a new perennial in. You say, oh, that's right, I put bulbs there. So always remember to mark your area. Here's just some examples of perennial flower beds. Again, we're talking about perennials. Chrysanthemums are fall blooming, daffodils early and mid-spring. Ours could be late spring blooming. Sedum in the summer and into the fall. Coreopsis in the summer. And butterfly milkweed in the summer. And butterfly milkweed is an important plant for monarch butterflies. They host the monarch butterflies, so if you can get those, that's a good thing. You might find them at Elms Center, which is on Route 235 south of the base. They may still have some, or check with your garden centers on those. So thank you so much. Again, remember HGIC, Home Garden Information Center. Google HGIC Maryland. That'll bring up the link. There's an Ask the Expert button on that link. You can click that button and you can upload any gardening question or problem that you have. And within 24 to 48 hours, someone from the University of Maryland Extension will email you back with an answer. I've used it multiple times. It is amazing and a wonderful resource for everyone. Because none of us are masters, everyone is a gardener learning from year to year. We learn from each other, and it's great to have the extension service there to answer your question. And of course, anyone interested in the Master Gardener program and joining the St. Mary's County program, you can contact Mariah Dean. She's our coordinator, and her email is there, mrdean@umd.edu. I think the next Master Gardener class will start in 2022. We just had one in the early part of 2020. Happens every other year. So again, hope that you'll get involved. It's a very fun group, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and you can look forward to other videos and topics coming up in the future. But take care and happy gardening. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that's the end of that recording. So thank you again, Patricia. You did amazing. I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I just want to show you guys. So this is a bulb. It's a shallot. I got it at the farmer's market because a lot of places still don't have a lot of spring bulbs, at least when I checked a couple weeks ago. So you can see this is where the roots are, and this is the top of the bulb. So when you plant the bulb in the ground, you want to plant it like this. And then like Patricia said, for each bulb, you want to check to see what basically what the back of the box or bag says, and how to plant it and how deep to plant it. But general rule of thumb is you measure it, how tall it is. And this is, I already measured, it's a little bit hard to see. It's almost 3 inches, 2 3/4. So you just multiply that by 2 or 3. So you plant this like 6 inches in the ground or so. That's just general rule of thumb. And I wanted to show you guys that's the top and those are the roots, because sometimes it can be a little bit hard. Most of the time the shape will be kind of consistent, but of course there's different size bulbs and everything. But that's just general rule of thumb. Well, thank you so much again, Patricia.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it very much. It was fun to do with you, and a good experimental first try at this. So hopefully we can do more in the future.
Yeah, we have another one in 2 weeks with the library. I'll be doing trees, and also how to, if you do plant new trees, how to protect them from the periodical cicadas that'll be coming up next. Yeah.
Oh boy. Look out for that.
Yeah, it's the big brood. So I was just like, well, people are probably going to plant trees, so we get to let them know how to protect them. So we'll do that one in 2 weeks, and then we'll see what else we got going. So,
okay, great.
Well, it looks like
we have a few questions. So yeah, so we can start with the first one. Where can I buy good compost in bulk?
I think Meadows Farms has some. Wentworth might have some as well. I'm honestly unsure where else has some. I would Google some more places. Patricia, by any chance, do you know anywhere that sells compost?
What is that? What is that farm on across from McKay's on Hollywood Road? Is it? I think they have bulk compost, but I'm not sure if it's compost or mulch.
Yeah.
It's a Mennonite farm.
Somebody in chat says maybe Holly Hill. Is it Holly Hill?
Holly Hills, that might, I think that's the name of it. I've seen, in previous times, I've seen big mounds of, it might be mulch. It might not be compost.
Or just manure.
I'm not sure about compost. Usually it's bulk mulch.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
some
but just
places,
call around. Yeah.
yeah, some places like farms, I know UMD, like their food safety things is compost has a certain amount of time and a certain amount of temperature it has to be true compost. And if it doesn't meet those, then people just say that's manure. There's a lot of different places to get manure. But if you're putting it on like fruits and vegetables, you really, anything that you're going to eat, you really want to make sure it's been through all of those like food safety levels to go to composting. A lot of farms probably have manure, and you can always compost. You get some manure and compost it yourself too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of
Somebody
places
else
that
in
sell.
chat.
Oh,
Sorry. I was
oh
going to
no,
say
that's
somebody else in
good.
chat said Green Acres is an Amish nursery that sells large bags as well.
Nice.
Good. Yeah, I love Green Acres. One of my favorite spots.
Right. Our next question is it okay to plant flowers or bulbs close to the foundation of the house?
Yeah. You want to plant shallow rooted stuff close to the house instead of like deeply rooted stuff. Like whenever I see people planting like big trees next to their house, I can't help but cringe because those roots will just go in and mess with your foundation or all sorts of stuff. Bulbs, since they're so small, unless they attract a lot of insects, like termites, then you're good to go to plant those near your house. They actually probably look very lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't plant, great big bulb plants real close to the foundation. You want to have room for the plant to have space. But if it's small stuff, it'll be fine. Like crocuses, they're small.
Yeah.
And uh, will you be able to provide us with the slides that you had in your video?
I guess that's up to you, Patricia. I'm not really sure.
I don't think there's any problem with sharing the slides.
Okay.
I don't know of any reason why not.
If you want to share them with me and then I can send them out to the registrants with the link to the video, then everybody can get those with those links and things on those slides. That'd be great.
Okay.
And then it's now the time to dig and share bearded iris.
Now's okay. June and July is also really good. But yeah.
What was the question about when to divide bearded iris? Right now. Yeah, now is a good time to divide those spring blooming bulbs. So if you can get out in the yard, in the next few weeks when we have good weather and enjoy dividing, now is a good time to do it.
Okay. And how about splitting hostas like daylilies? How do you do that?
Exact same.
Right now is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
And any recommendations for bulbs in shady areas?
I would really say it depends on how shady. I know like tulips do pretty well in part shade. Daffodils. Do you have any recommendations for shady bulbs that do well in?
I would agree. Probably look at the type of bulb and see what it says on the package. If it says part sun, that's an indication it might do well in shade. I don't know about total shade, but I would say part shade for tulips, and daffodils can do okay in part shade. So a lot of plants like sun, but some of those early spring blooming bulbs can do shade better than the ones that bloom in the summer.
Do you have any recommendations for bulbs that deer don't like?
Definitely stay away from tulips if you have any deer issues. Tulips are like eye candy for us, but just normal candy for deer. They will chew those. Same with hostas. Anything like really smooth leaf, deer love. They tend to stay away from hairy leaf stuff, but nothing is really truly like deer resistant. There can be stuff that they don't like as much, but if there's no food, they'll go for anything. Daffodils are less prone to deer damage. Like they don't like them as much because their leaves are a little bit spikier, whereas tulips are like those nice flat, smooth, round leaves that deer just go for. So anything crocuses, anything that has like the more pointy style, or anything with a hairier leaf, which I can't really think of any bulbs with hairy leaves off the top of my head.
Yeah. I can't either. I don't know.
Yeah, there might be some. I can't think of them off the
I
top of my
don't
head
know.
right now. But daffodils, crocus, things like that. Stay away from tulips if you have deer.
I'm not sure if they like daylilies, do they? They don't bother mine, but they might, like you say, if they can't get food, they might eat anything.
Yeah, I think that's. I can't remember off the top of my head if they really like the. I know they like hostas. Tulips and hostas are like the first to go if they're deer in the area, and they don't have many other food sources.
Someone in the chat says they have the reticulated iris that bloom late winter to early spring, and the deer don't bother them.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Reticulated. That's interesting. I have to look that up.
Yeah, see here.
All right, and we have another question. My garlic last year were very small. What can I do differently? Should I cut down the stalks from the bulbs?
I don't know. I haven't grown garlic. How do we get it bigger?
Yeah, I don't have much experience with growing garlic. It could be the variety. Um, you can always try like fertilizer, making sure they get enough water, even in like the off season, like the summer. If they don't get enough water, they won't grow properly. Cut down
You
the
could always
stalk.
hit that ask, you could do the ask the expert button at the extension and give them that question and see what they say. So
Yeah.
that would be an interesting to find out. I don't know. I've never tried to grow it myself.
Yeah, me either. Garlic is not one I've grown.
All right. Do some bulbs need to be dug up in the fall and replanted in early spring?
No, unless you're doing like dahlias, don't do well in our winter. So if you want to dig those up, like put them in a pot, like in your garage or somewhere where they don't get a lot of light and they won't bloom, but they're also not like gonna freeze, but they're also not just gonna like be like sitting in a corner in your house sort of thing. Then you can replant them. So anything like real sensitive, like dahlias, but like tulips, daffodils, crocuses, you can just leave those out. Those are well suited for our climate. But any like annual, and most of the time it'll say annual when you go to buy it, like on the tag or like the bag or anything. Do you have anything to add, Patricia?
Yeah, what she's saying is correct. Just read the label of the plant you're buying, and if it says to take it up in the fall and store it in a cool, dry place so it's safe in the winter inside, some plants require that, but most items stay outside all winter in our area.
Okay. And what should you do with iris leaves after the blooms are spent?
What I do is, the iris leaves, I leave them on there. I like the greenage color of the leaves. Now, if you see things starting to turn yellow or you get little black spots, that could be like a little fungus starting to form on the leaves. I remove those spent leaves and put them in the garbage, not the compost, because I want to keep the fungus away from my compost area. So if you see yellowing or spotty leaves, you can break them off and just keep the green foliage, because that's bringing the energy back down to the root. Of course, some people do trim them off low because they're trying to show off other things in the flower bed. And you can do that if you want the look of removing the iris leaf so that something else is showier. But you can just leave it until it starts looking bad. It looks yellow or brown. Then you can trim it off. And usually by the time we have 1 or 2 freezes, everything looks kind of brown. And you can, as you want to, trim everything off.
Okay, so we have another couple. Are dahlias bulbs or tubers?
They are tubers. They're not true bulbs.
Okay. We are in planting zone 7 or 7B. How close are we to zone 8?
So for that one, I'm going to share my screen. So this is the USDA plant hardiness zone map. So it looks like 8 is like this peach color. So we're about here. It's a little bit hard to pinpoint us exactly. But so I don't know I didn't really know how to answer that one verbally. So I figured we're about that close.
Okay. Then back to the Q&As. I have 2 hydrangeas and they never bloom. Why? Should I cut them back in the fall?
So I hate to do this because I hate it when this happens, but I guess my question, that's one of those things I have to answer with questions. Depends on like where you planted it, if it was a good site for it. Hydrangeas do really well in part shade, but you don't want them too shaded because then they won't get enough sun and they won't have all that photosynthesis and everything, and then they won't bloom. Maybe they're not getting enough water. It can also be the variety and how old they are. From my experience of planting hydrangeas, the older they are, the more prolific the blooms are. And one thing I always try to remember with perennials, I think I read this in a Better Homes and Garden magazine or the website, like I don't know how many years ago. It's like the first year they weep because they're sad because they're adjusting this new place and everything. And then the second year they sleep, and I just try to think of it as like they're adjusting to this stuff. Like they weep, like, oh, I had to move, and then, oh, they sleep because they're like, oh, okay, I'm resting, I'm getting adjusted, getting a lot of good rest. And then the third year they weep because they're just well adjusted to their new home and everything. So that might be something else to consider. And again, it could be the variety. With that, I would really consider, I would look at the location and make sure it's getting everything it needs. You could always try fertilizing a little bit. Hydrangea is one of those plants that changes depending on how alkaline or acidic the soil is. Patricia, do you have anything to add?
I think you covered it. Yeah, it's all about proper drainage and light and a little bit of fertilizer. So it just needs the right spot. And some things do great, and then you move them across the way, and they don't do well. So every plant has its own spot it likes.
Yep.
Okay. If you're not sure where you want to plant your dug up bulbs, how do you store them for planting next year?
Same thing as like with the dahlias or any other annual bulbs or tubers or anything that you want to save for next year. If it's a bulb and you want to plant it next year, you can leave it in the ground if it's something that's for our zone, or if it's something you're like, you can always just dig it up, make sure it's real dry, or you can put a little bit like sawdust or straw. Just make sure it doesn't get like moldy or anything, any moisture, because it'll rot. Just stick it in a dark, cool, dry place in your garage, and then plant it next year. Dig it up in the fall. That's how I would do it. What about you, Patricia? Do you have anything?
I think that's correct. I think you don't want them to be in a damp place, or you don't want it to be a lot of light to make it start trying to do something, because the temperature is different in your garage than it would be outside, because it's going to stay dormant in a cold temperature outside. But if you bring it indoors anywhere, it's going to be a little bit different temperature. So it could throw the plant off just a little bit, but you don't want it, really you don't want it to dry out, I wouldn't think. Sometimes things can dry out too much. That can be damaging to it as well. That's why keeping it outside where it gets natural moisture from rain or whatever is really the best bet for it. But if you have to save them or try to, it can be saved, but it's not as, the success rate is not as good as leaving it outside.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything else in Q&A, and I don't see anything else for chat. Anybody got anything else? Okay. I guess we're about done then.
Yep. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I double checked the chat. I don't see anything else. The Q&A's all done, so. All right. Well, thank you all.
Just got another question there.
Oh.
At
Okay.
Asbury, I would like to plant bulbs in our median driveway area soil.
Is it Asbury Solomons? That's the only Asbury I know. I've honestly never been there. It's been somewhere I've wanted to check out, but I haven't gone. They have, I think they have some sales that I wanted to go to that I just haven't gotten to. Plant bulb in our median. Soil is full of roots. We have a garden club. Yeah, I'm not sure how the soil is. Soil is full of roots. When it's real full of roots, it might be a little bit harder to plant. And depending on how like deep, if it's a median, it really depends on how deep the soil is and everything. Bulbs need less than a lot of other plants. Like they can do really well in containers since you only plant it 2 to 3 times the length, but then you got to make sure you have enough space for the roots too. But it's not like a tree that needs like so much more root space. Yeah, that's one of those things. I don't really
You have to find out what their goal is. Do they want something blooming in the summer? Or is it just a springtime bloom? You know, it's good to think about the light. How big are the trees in the median? Is it shady? You know, so it must be some trees if they have a lot of root problems, perhaps. So it really has to be looked at to make a recommendation.
Yep. Yeah. That's one of those, we don't really know unless we get the send us pictures to mrdean@umd.edu or our Facebook and send us pictures on there. We have a new Facebook. You can send us pictures on there. We're happy to help. That's one of those. Please send especially now. We can't really do any site visits right now. So sending pictures would be good so that we can help you figure out what to do. We have shady crepe myrtle. Yeah. Yeah. We'd love to see it in pictures.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for hosting us and helping with the Q&A and the chat and all the questions. You've been a big help. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia, so much. Your Jen is in the presentation. She said you're a natural presenter. I agree.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the library for doing this. And I'm glad that people are interested in learning more about it. So thank you, Mariah, for doing this, and Sarah and Jeff, and hope to see you again.
All right. End the recording and end the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.